Hello,
I'm
Baljeet.
How are
How
you?
are you? Doing well, doing well. I remember our discussion of, about time of services and APIs and how we can try to solve, let's say, this problem, as a business risk from legal agreements. And it seems you made a talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. So let me share my screen.
Yeah. And also, just to let you know, you have a little bit more minutes because of the earlier speaker went a little bit shorter. So yeah, you can take a little bit of your time.
Okay, I just uploaded my PPT. So is this the PDF version or the PPT?
At least we see it full screen. I don't know what it is, but it works.
Okay, great. So let me see if I can.
Are you moving the slide? If you're, yeah, okay. Now we see a second slide with
Okay,
all your, yeah, it's moving.
okay, so
Perfect.
let me. I had looks like this is the PDF version. Let me try uploading the PPT. Just give me 1 second.
Perfect. This is why we have extra time too.
Okay, looks like it has uploaded.
Or you can share your screen also, right?
Okay, it's almost done.
Seems to work.
Okay, great. So let's get started. Uh,
Perfect.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with the audience today. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you guys are. My name is Baljeet. I'm the founder and CEO of TeejLab. You can read more about me on my LinkedIn and professional other networks and resources. So let me talk about first how or what are the best ways to quantify today's API economy. And one way we thought we can quantify this API economy is comparing the growth of APIs with the growth of websites. So, web services, websites. And philosophically, it makes sense to compare because at the end of the day, APIs are transacting data. They provide information very much similar to websites. It's just that APIs are a bit more dynamic. They provide more machine-to-machine automation, perhaps more intelligence with some AI ML-driven solutions. So if you look at the blue curve, so this is the growth of the websites, and this other curve represents the growth of APIs. They are not at the same scale, but they're expected to grow to the same scale with software, data, services moving into the cloud. You will see more and more integrations which will be done through these APIs. As a matter of fact, if you look at the number on the right hand side, 83%, that actually quantifies very concretely, the amount of data that is being transacted over the internet through these APIs. Now, why this slide was important for me to talk about the API legal agreement management was on the next slide. So if you look at some of the global repositories, either Postman or MuleSoft has, programmable web. Unfortunately, they shut it down, but that was one of the largest repositories out there, and Rapid API. So all these repositories were there that are kind of tracking these APIs at a global scale. And we, as a company, we started tracking them back in 2019, and we have built a knowledge base where we can see these APIs, not only what are the endpoints, what data they are being transacting, but also the legal agreements that govern the usage of those APIs, which is the topic of this discussion today. So, why we want to do this? There are several benefits of tracking these APIs for risk management to better govern the API economy and to provide solutions to enterprises at global scale and discovery, risk management, leveraging upon the existing infrastructure. Speaker before me talked about how gateways and models, machine learning models, are coming together to provide new kinds of services, access control mechanisms. And this continues to evolve. And having the ability to look at these APIs at a global scale gave us the ability to share some of the interesting insights that I'm going to present today. In order for us to quantify these risks, or as a matter of fact, any business problem you are trying to solve, you need metrics. You know, API health, API category, API inventory. More recently, OWASP included API inventory or API discovery in their top 10 recommendations, because a lot of enterprises are actually struggling with their inventory, just managing their APIs, finding their APIs, where those APIs are, and finding the associated analytics. And on top of that, you need to understand their functionalities, if there are any vulnerabilities on those APIs, authentication, authorization issues, and there are a lot of other issues as well. Are they transacting any personal information, and so on and so forth. Some of the other metrics that I mentioned here, like trust, risk management, health, are a bit more difficult, but there are mathematical ways or model driven approaches that we can apply to quantify these risks or monitor these APIs for various purposes, from a security point of view, from a risk management point of view, or even managing the compliance and secure compliance from a business point of view. Now, specifically, the topic, unfortunately, my animation is not working, but I was going to highlight the topic for today is the API agreements, and what are the associated risks that we see by looking at these hundreds of thousands of APIs all across different geographies. Typically, in an enterprise environment, you might have seen, and Madhi, actually, you are one of the leaders in this space. You are looking into, how we can help as a community enterprises manage their legal agreements. There are automation solutions, but nonetheless, companies continue to adopt various frameworks to manage or govern their APIs. Privacy statements, privacy documents, global privacy statements, API terms of use, platform policies, and whatnot. Specifically, when these services, they evolve to become more complex, where it is not just the technology and the functionality that is being exposed through an API, but if the community is involved. For example, the platforms like Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, where a lot of APIs empower different businesses to operate on these platforms, these things could become very, very complex. And the difficulty is these vendors are constantly evolving their terms of services, their privacy statements, their usage policies. And we, as an API management company, since our task is to track these APIs at a global scale, tracking these agreements become even more difficult. As I mentioned on one of my slides, that we have over 50,000 or so APIs that we are tracking in our knowledge base. The licensing issues, security issues, compliance issues, what data they're exchanging, and so on and so forth. And if you do a simple math, if each of those APIs have at least two documents to govern their usage, privacy statements, and the terms of usage. Then you're talking about a factor of two, 50,000 times two, so 100,000. Now, this is just the beginning, how we are quantifying this API economy moving forward. And how do we make this economy more smarter by managing these legal agreements, perhaps leveraging upon some of the AI technologies that are available. But now you scale that and multiply that to hundreds of thousands, to perhaps billions in the future, and at least two times of that legal agreements that you need to track, that you need to manage, that you need to quantify the risk, and so on and so forth. So it's a really very interesting problem for us to solve. And today I will not be able to talk about all those problems in one go, but I will definitely give you some glimpses and pieces of those problems. So let me start with some use cases. One of the challenges that you face when you have a very large API ecosystem, and I'm talking about large in a typical enterprise in hundreds of APIs. I've seen first-hand cases. Forget about the entire company. Forget about all the products and services. I'm talking about one single product with thousands of API integrations, at least 5,000 or so that we could count. And if you go back to my previous slide where I compared them with the growth of websites, um, the data governance, data sovereignty becomes truly a problem here, because your APIs may be hosted all across the globe. These are essentially transacting data. It's much easier for a DevOps team to move their servers from one location to another locations, and your URI never changes, so you never know. Now your data is being stored, even if it is a single sign-on API, just storing email address or some sort of identification that is personally attached to your corporate ID and whatnot. At the end of the day, personal information. So when you look at this ecosystem, it's not just about managing APIs from a product point of view, but also from a data governance perspective as well. And that makes it very interesting, because if you look at the laws of the land, I'm just giving a snapshot of the laws in the US. There are other sets of laws in Canada, in India, in some of the other countries as well. So many of these laws talk about protecting, consumers, protecting children, protecting, enterprises, business interest, and so on and so forth. And many times, those terms of services would refer to these laws of the lands, and you, as a consumer or producer of those APIs, and hence providing those legal agreements, it is your responsibility how this ecosystem evolves. Specifically, from a consumer point of view, if your enterprise ecosystem depends on a lot of third-party services that are integrated through these APIs, your challenges escalate greatly. And mining this data, looking at some of these issues becomes a very important problem, where machine learning or natural language processing or some of the other AI technologies can help us. And I'm going to show some of those use cases now. So one of the case studies we took was, let me rephrase again what I have covered so far. So we are tracking these APIs at a global scale into thousands, their legal agreements into hundreds of thousands, and in the future moving forward, perhaps millions and billions. And one of the things, I even spoke to Madhi about this. If you remember, we talked about this. Having standardization is one thing, where we can collect some of the thought leaders and industry players together to standardize some of this. But perhaps you will tend to agree to me that unstructured way will still continue to evolve for various reasons, business reasons, laws of the land. So these companies will be forced to adopt various frameworks and whatnot. So we wanted to sample this data. So what are the terms of services provided by Facebook, LinkedIn, OpenAPI, more so. And we found, now you can imagine, we cannot do this manually. I mean, we could certainly hire an army of people to start analyzing and taking help from our lawyer colleagues. But as you can imagine, this is not scalable, right? So we need machines help. We need artificial intelligence. We need some sort of natural language processing solutions. So we wanted to do this at a scale which represents the knowledge base that we have, tracking these into millions. And we took some samples. We may not have time to cover all of them, but as you can imagine, I'm highlighting some of these cases here. So in this particular case, with OpenAI, I mean, this is the hot topic, not just OpenAI, but a lot of AI-driven technologies where there are models and vendors are providing different evolving terms of services, how they should be governed, how they should be used. So I'm highlighting one of this thing. You might, if you come from a compliance background, audit background, you might have heard of expression called export control. So whenever softwares are shipped, there are strict guidelines, and you have to you have to be compliant with those laws, that these products are not shipped to countries where there are restrictions. And OpenAI in this context is not very different. So they are talking about their services, in this case API integrations. They cannot be used in the context of where there are export embargoes. Now you go back to my previous statement. Now these are APIs. Of course, gateways can access control where the traffic is coming from, if it is coming from a different geography. But that there could be proxy solutions and whatnot. So it becomes a very difficult problem to enforce these constraints or these terms of services across your usage base, and finding, monitoring, taking the behavior of those users and making sure that you are compliant with these laws. Of course, hackers and the malicious users will continue to defeat the purpose or defeat the system. But again, you got to do the best you can. So this sampling of these legal agreements and what kind of different approaches these enterprises are taking, or as a matter of fact, not just enterprises, government organizations, nonprofit, and everybody pretty much in the same API ecosystem, having the same challenge and issues. Another case study that I want to highlight here is of Facebook, and this is a in particularly very interesting one. But let me take a quick pause here to see, Madi, if there is any question from the audience. I don't mind being interrupted right now, and see if there is any question I can answer. Or Madi, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer right now, or I can simply continue. All right. So looks like okay. So looks like there are no questions. So I'll just continue. So, in this case, one of the interesting things we observed with the Facebook terms of services is, as I mentioned, we could track, how these are evolving. How what kind of different strategies these enterprises are taking to govern their usage. So what I'm highlighting here on the screen is an assessment of which is done by, of course, by the AI, because we cannot just simply do this manually. Here, the assessment, the AI-driven assessment, highlighted that there were certain terms and conditions back in 2017 that actually made sense from Facebook's intellectual property perspective. For example, in this case, I'm highlighting Facebook is essentially saying don't replicate core functionalities that compete with Facebook features and functions. And as you can imagine, this makes complete sense. I mean, why would any business would want to give you access to your APIs to build products and functionalities that compete with them, right? So that doesn't make sense from a business point of view. And we continue to investigate this, and there are some other terms of services where you can see don't build apps and so on and so forth, which restrict you or violate certain policies from laws of the land, or violates the policies of Facebook, or as a matter of fact any other enterprise. Interestingly, in the very recent terms of services, all of those constraints were dropped. Now, the question you may want to answer, or perhaps at least think about it, why an enterprise would do that? Why would they stop saying that, stop using my APIs to build the features that compete with me? Now, there is no there is no straightforward answer because we can only speculate. We don't know exactly what the strategy is. Perhaps could this be a technical mistake? But I would imagine this is not a technical mistake. Of course, they have a lawyer of armies. They have an army of lawyers, and they would be very, very due diligent. Or as a matter of fact, any enterprise would be very due diligent to do this. Now, then the next thought comes into our mind is, could this be a strategy where you want to see how the competition evolves and perhaps strike at a time when this becomes challenging to you, right? So if you are too restrictive to begin with and curb this acceleration of innovation which APIs bring to the economy, it becomes a very, very interesting problem. Now, this becomes a double-edged sword. It can swing both ways, right? So it could be counterproductive, but it could also be very effective enterprise strategy where you could essentially check some of the competition. Now, we may not necessarily have time to go through all those details, but I hope you get the point. I hope you get the point why API legal agreement management at a global scale, we as a company becomes very useful, but also for enterprises or enterprises that need to use third-party APIs to get the analytics that could be useful to mitigate their business risk that you can perhaps classify and quantify from these legal agreements. Now, so let me summarize, why this is challenging. First of all, moving forward, or as a matter of fact, right now you may have thousands of APIs, hundreds of vendors, perhaps hundreds of tools all across your enterprise products and services. And not just I'm talking about API management tools. I'm talking about all your analytics, software scanning, security tools, your data warehouse tools, all kinds of tools. Pretty much every products and services are integrated through those APIs. So you have invisibility issues, you have scalability issues, which teams are using which APIs, and so on and so forth. So collectively, managing your legal agreements governing the usage of those APIs becomes a very interesting yet very challenging problem. So if we still have time, Madhi did mention that we have a little bit more time because the earlier presentation went a little bit faster. So Madhi, if we have maybe a few more minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, I can give a quick agreement processing demonstration live. If not, then I'm ready to take the question. So of course, I'm going to ignore everything else, but I'm just going to walk you through some of these use cases. The other interesting aspect I will highlight is, for example, if you look at the terms of services here, uh, another challenge is they could evolve. As I mentioned, they are living documents. They have to be evolved, and there is a reason behind it because all these APIs usage are rooted in the usage of essentially data, and new laws may come, new policies, enterprise policies may come, so they must be evolved. So you can see that this open AI terms of services just evolved back in March in 14. And if you look at some of their privacy terms, they evolved just in June this year, just a few days ago. And this is what I was talking about, and so is the case with every vendor, with every terms of services and whatnot. So let me show you the 2017 assessment of Facebook policy. So this is the AI solution that is essentially analyzing the terms of services or the platform policy of Facebook right now, where it will highlight some of the permissions, some of the obligations, some of the prohibitions, and whatnot. And as you can see that in this case, they are talking about don't replicate core functionalities of Facebook. That's in 2017. Now, let me do the assessment of their today's copy. So this is today's. This will pick up the latest copy of Facebook platform policy and will analyze that. Now, interestingly, as you can see that no constraints found. So this is 2017 and this is 2023. Now, there are so many other interesting use cases we are discovering by mining, managing these agreements at a global scale, and we would not be able to do this without the help of artificial intelligence or natural language processing solutions. So I will stop sharing my this screen and switch my screen to. So Madhu, you are seeing my screen again, the slides.
Can you put? Yes, yes, we see API agreement management. Yes.
Okay, so I invite all my colleagues or the audience to check this out. We have a community platform, and we would love to get your feedback and see how we can solve this problem together. This is a massive issue, massive problem that will block the growth of API economy moving forward. So I'm Baljeet. This is my contact information. Very grateful to Madhi and the team and the rest of the API Days interface team for inviting us to talk about this problem. I'm very happy to stay for a few more minutes and answer any questions. So Madhi, thank you so much again. Back to you.
Thank you, Baljeet. One question I have is, in the supply chain and logistics industry, procurement teams actually knows well the contract, they knows well the delivery time, they know all these engagement, and actually this is their job to manage like hundreds of suppliers, conditions, deliveries, SLA at some point, but like physical SLAs, right? And most of the time they know how to do that. Why before your solution, right? But why today we did not have the same knowledge on the digital world, right? No, it's still the jungle, many API terms, privacy terms, term of services, and like enterprise agreements. Like it's a huge mess. Why we've not been able to kind of standardize or at least make it a real practice of digital risk supply chain management?
Yeah, that's a great question and also a thought at the same time. And there are several challenges, but let me highlight two important challenges. First of all, uh, the difficulty is either you talk about SLAs or even open source. Open source had licenses, and the legal teams are very much familiar with the licenses, and they know how to mitigate those risks. The difficulty with API terms and privacy statements and the other legal documents that govern the usage of those APIs, they're always evolving. And now a typical enterprise is dealing with at least thousands of APIs. And you can multiply that with at least two times, so 10,000. So, as a matter of fact, I spoke to a few of my lawyer colleagues who were responsible for the due diligence for third-party usage in a very large enterprise. And they said, Baljeet, we can't solve this problem, man. Every time a developer comes to me for an open source usage, I know how to guide them and say, okay, go ahead, you have the approval, go use this open source. But they say, I don't know what to do with the APIs because I do the approval today. They could change tomorrow. Should I go every 2 months? Should I go check them every 6 months? So the scalability is the issue, Madhi, here. The other difficulty is now you pointed out another thing why the legal agreement document management companies cannot solve this problem. The problem is it's so big and huge. And we need to apply new methodologies, new technologies like AI and all that to take the next step forward.
But on the API term of services, on the open source license, the open source initiative like 25 years ago said, okay, this is the definition of open source. Like we don't have yet the definition of an open API, but we have these licenses which are quite well standardized, like MIT license or Apache 2 license, or where everybody knows what's in there. Like it's at some point it's easy to understand. But with API term of services, every lawyer is doing their own terms. So do you know any standardization projects or anything like that to standardize API term of services to make them more easily readable?
Well, one is by you guys. So I the last time I got familiar, you told me that this is an effort that you guys are taking. Uh, but to be honest with you, I did not see any effort in this context yet. And the reasons could be, see, APIs are very dynamic. One day you have an API that is exposing a JSON response containing one data, but that API may evolve to include some other pieces of information. Now the terms of services have changed, or should be changed, right? So like SPDX or some of the other organizations or efforts that have looked at this problem from standardization point of view. But to be honest, it's a very difficult problem because every enterprise has its own strategy. There are different geographical boundaries, there are export control policies. Then they have their own strategies, how they want to monetize it, the rate limits and all that stuff. So that makes this, it is still possible. I'm not saying that it is not possible to standardize it. But what I'm saying is, even though the standardizations will be adopted, but it is just a matter of time, those will evolve to have some use cases and edge cases that you will still need, AI driven solutions to monitor, because you cannot simply go monitor them manually.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the APITOS.org project we're running is actually, we found that there are too many degrees of liberty to standardize, but at least we can have some standard clause.
True.
So that at least 5 or 6 or 7 clause amongst like 40, but at least
True.
that are the important ones and that are clear and easy to understand. Then the other ones will be there. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
very much, Baljeet. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Baljeet, for your presentation and for explaining that in such a meaningful way.
Thank you so much, Madi, for the invite.
And see you to the next APIs conference.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Thank you.